for joining us for the inaugural online Open Studio event with the MFA students at the School of Art at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas. Hey, there you are. I was missing seeing your faces. Hey, my name is Sara-Jayne Parsons. I'm the curator of the art galleries here at TCU, and I'm really delighted to be here this afternoon to have this opportunity to introduce you to our 12 wonderful current MFA students. If you don't know, we have a 3-year program here at TCU. And so the students you're going to meet this afternoon are at different stages of their master's degree in the beginnings of their professional career. So some are in their first year. Let's see where the first years are. Give us a wave. They are just a few months into their studies and settling into their studios. We also have some second years who are preparing for their candidacy show. Hey, second years. Their candidacy show will open at Fort Worth Contemporary Arts in January. And then we have our very studious third years who are hard at work with plans for their solo thesis exhibitions beginning in March. And they will each have a solo show for a week long in Madi Gallery here in the Madi building that you see behind me. So just to give you a little bit of context, typically on an open studio night, our students invite the public into their studios here at the Madi North building. And they spend time talking about their work, answering questions about their work, but about school, life in general, anything could happen on open studio night. This is a really great opportunity for people to get a sneak peek at what our students are working on, as well as learn about their practice and learn a little bit more about the School of Art here at TCU. We also think of this as part of the student experience. It's a useful and significant aspect of their professional trainings. They spend a lot of time with our faculty in critique about their work and with each other, but it's also really useful for them to hear from people outside of the school. So coming into their studios and asking questions is really important as part of their practice. I'd also add, if you are considering, you watchers out there, if you're considering doing an MFA, an open studio event like this is a really great way to learn about a program because you get to hear the experiences from the students directly. You will see their spaces, you learn about the facilities that are available. So these are just some of the things that you're going to see tonight with our wonderful group here. So we're not able to obviously offer this in-person experience today. And so instead, the students have made short videos to introduce themselves, their work, and their studio spaces. And so this afternoon, we're going to present 3 video segments, one that includes the work of the first years, one with the second years, and one with the third years. And after each segment airs, you'll have an opportunity to ask our students questions or share observations. So please feel free to post your comments and questions in our chat function while the videos are playing or indeed throughout the session today. At the end of our Open Studios event, the students are also going to present a short video tour of their group exhibition, Cancel the Chicken, which I can't wait to find out how they came up with that title. That is currently installed in our student project space here at Madi. And it's going to be a great way to end this event on a collective note. But let's get to the real meat of the sandwich here, or avocado if you're a vegetarian. Let's begin with our first year students' videos. Sheryl, Anaya, Sarah Hunt, Benjamin Loftis, and Madi Ortega. Give us a little wave. We're going to start looking at your work, and then we'll come back to you in just a few moments for some questions and comments. All right. Thank you, everybody. Please put your questions and observations in the chat. Thanks.
Hi, come on in. My name is Sheryl Anaya, and I am a first-year MFA sculpture student here at TCU. Welcome to our virtual open studios, and I'm going to be showing you around at some things that I'm working on my first semester. All right, so here are some things that I've been working on this semester. I've been working a lot in fibers. So here's a handmade net with rocks. Some themes and ideas that I'm thinking about right now are domesticity, memory, relationships, identity. I've really just kind of been exploring new ideas and thinking about different ways of working than I'm used to. So this piece right here, this is the pattern for a large tufted sculpture. But once I cut out the pattern pieces, it will look like this model right here. And this is the pattern that I made that I'm working from. And it is the flower from a flamboyant tree in Puerto Rico. And so I've kind of been thinking about this disconnect that I feel from the island and my family. And yeah, trying to make sense of that relationship by exploring some ideas. So here's the front of the piece, and you can see this really nice texture. So that's what I'm working on now. Then there's this piece here that I'm working on, and it is a recreation of this tile in my grandmother's bathroom. And she lives in Arroyo, Puerto Rico. And so I'm kind of thinking about place and what it means, and yeah, just this disconnect that I feel from a place that I was born but I didn't grow up in. Here's another piece that I made that is also tufted. And so really I've just been exploring and allowing myself to just make. It's a soft book. It's a mock-up here that I'm working on. And this is Marshmallow. Say hi, Marshmallow. Thank you for joining me today.
Alright, what's up guys? My name is Madi. I'm a first year MFA at TCU, and here is my studio tour. So over here we have my paper making supplies. I have my blenders, tubs, and a giant mold and decal. And up here on my work table, I have materials I'm working with right now, which include buckskin leather, seed beads, and arrowheads to pin objects on the wall. On my wall, I have pieces that are either finished or are in the process of being finished, and I pin them up here to look at. If you haven't noticed so far, my work right now is focused on representing my identity as having come from both European colonizers and indigenous peoples, and how that relates to me in modern times. And back here you can see my most favorite wall in my studio. It is my plant wall. I have all kinds of things growing back here, including flower bulbs, which are significant in my work because most of them were brought here by European colonizers as a commodity and for their beauty. I also have native plants like zinnias and other things growing to contrast those flower bulbs in my work and symbolically represent my heritage. And now we're back at the front of my studio. Here's some books I made on Blurb that you can go check out. I have some more dried tulip bulbs up here, some more buckskin, turkey feathers in a grocery bag. And back here is my pin wall. Up here, I'm collecting one thing that is significant or presents itself to me in some way each day. And I'm going to do that for 100 days until the end of the semester. And I hope you guys enjoyed my crib. Peace out.
Oh hey, welcome to my studio. Come on in. This is where the magic happens. So these are my junk shelves. I have like my snacks up here, and then I have fabric that I'm working with, coffee, magazines, the Den Barbie. You can get it at Walmart. I have some books from my favorite artists like Durr, Kiki Smith, and oh wait, the best part, this amazing jumpsuit. I use my studio as a workspace, as a office space, and as a kind of display. My work is a therapeutic process in which I relate the obscuring of images to deal with personal struggles from childhood and the trauma associated with certain individuals. These thoughts and processes lead me into questioning ideals of masculinity and how that relates to my own personal identity. Coming into this grad program at TCU, I wanted to push myself in directions I've never explored before and experimenting with photographic processes as well as ceramic sculpting. This past week I started working on these porcelain noses that are going to be a wall installation of 50 noses in a documenting line of progression, and each one is sculpted from memory. In my 2D work, I relate imagery and photographic elements back to childhood and the moments where I destroyed personal artifacts that related to my father in any way. And destroying and obscuring imagery like in photography connects the idea of memory and destruction of that memory by the elements of like time, passing, space, or trauma. Alright, now get out. Come on, go. Bye. Peace.
Hi, I'm Sara-Jayne Hunt, and welcome to my studio.
I'm a first-year MFA student. I work primarily in painting and drawing, and some with new media. This year I've been working in painting and monoprints, which I've seen as another form of drawing. I pull a lot of my content from the natural environment, and being new to Texas, my work has definitely taken a pivot as I spend time in the outdoors here and been able to explore more local trails. It's really important for me to spend even just an hour or two out in my environment on the weekends to both gather source material and also be physically closer to the areas that I'm thinking about. I'm interested in the land, but I don't see my work as landscapes per se. To me, they become investigations into spaces. The land has been used so exhaustively throughout painting, and I'm really curious what else it can be used to talk about, or if landscape can even become a construct. By investigating these more crowded spaces, I think it helps circumvent the idea of the traditional vista. A lot of these spaces that I'm working with are mundane. They're more familiar and accessible. In these pieces, I've been exploring crowded areas versus more open spaces, and points of certainty with more ambiguity. In balancing those points, I hope to make room for the viewer to enter the work. Similar to the Rukin figure, I'm curious if these more vague areas or open spaces can actually become an openness for the viewer in that space or moment. If you were here in person, you'd see that I love to take a lot of notes on my studio walls, and I like to keep my reference material out for weeks or longer as I think about certain images before they eventually form into a work. A lot of time I've reduced these images down as well, so there's a little less information to process.
Thanks for watching.
Hey, first years. Thank you for giving us that little sneak peek into your spaces. So thank you all so much for your videos. First question, Ben, where can I get a jumpsuit like that?
Goodwill.
Okay, awesome. More seriously though, just watching your videos, I wondered if you maybe have questions for each other, just, you know, reflecting on making those videos yourselves and then watching each other's videos. And maybe not. No, it's all, you're all like kind of in the process, right? Okay. Well, then let me ask some specific questions of you. So Sheryl, let's start with you from your video piece. A lot of the work that you're doing, obviously making strong connections around memory and place, and as you said, sort of a displacement or dislocation. And I'm sort of curious how these pieces that are behind you that we can see, the tufted pieces, how they're sort of functioning themselves as sort of islands, these little separate forms that exist in this way. And I wondered, could you talk about them in terms of their verticality? Like they're on, these are, I'm assuming, like the rug type forms. They're usually things which are on the floor. That's our familiar experience with them. And you're moving them to the wall. And I just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit and that strategy around that.
Yeah, well, I think what I'm interested in is kind of taking it out of that context from something that you would traditionally see in that domestic setting. So with the piece behind me, it will actually be cut out and made into a sculptural form. So I'm thinking about this process of tufting that is usually for making rugs, and seeing how I can work it into a more sculptural way.
And will the scale stay, do you think, in a sort of domestic scale of something that would be recognizable in a home?
I think some of the pieces might, but with some of the wall pieces, I'm imagining them as multiples, to where it would be more like an installation where it would maybe cover an entire wall. So it might be something familiar, but not necessarily be something that you would see.
That you would expect, right?
Right.
Right. Okay, thank you. Madi, my question for you is, could you tell us all more about your paper making plans? You sort of showed us some of the equipment that you're using. Could you talk a little bit more about what you're hoping to do there and where you're up to?
Yeah, when I started creating paper, it was a way to break down books that have certain biases and opinions, and have references to concepts that I'm talking about in my work. So how that relates to colonization, indigenous peoples, plants that relate to that symbolic story. And I was originally placing objects in the paper made from different sculptural materials. And now I'm kind of transitioning into using paper pulp like soil, and how the concepts and ideas in the books kind of feed, quote unquote, the plants that I'm growing in the paper, or how that has a relationship with various plants that I'm putting in the paper.
Okay, thank you. I'm just noticing we have a question in our chat. What was your day job before grad school? Would anybody like to answer that and talk about how it's influencing your work right now?
I can go.
I can answer. No, you can, Ben.
Okay. So in undergrad, I worked for an artist named Linda Ridgway. She's a Dallas-based artist. And I think her handling of bronze so delicately and her handling of drawing has inspired me to take on those tasks with my own interpretation on those. And so that's why with her, I instantly was gravitated towards bronze work, and it kind of just went from there.
Okay.
So I worked for an artist as an assistant.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Anybody else responding to that question?
I was a glass blower at a studio down the street, actually, called Stecenko Studios.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where I worked for a little over a year, I think. Maybe 2 years, I can't remember. But that's what I got my BFA in at UTA, was in glass. So that's where I worked.
Okay, thank you. I should just also let you know that one of your professors has messaged in to say how nice it is to see your faces without masks because of all your teaching being socially distanced and safe. So that's nice to know your professors are watching, but they get to see you for real. Sheryl, Sarah, did you want to respond to that question about, influences that you've brought from outside, your life before grad school?
Well, before coming to grad school, I worked as a freelance photographer doing architectural photography. And I think, maybe there's something there with the interest in architecture and the types of sculptures that I'm interested in making. And I also worked as an educator at the Amon Carter. And I think, I don't know what I have brought in from being an educator, aside from maybe how I think about making the work.
Yeah.
Do you mean in terms then of how you're talking about it, or you're just thinking through the steps, the process?
Yeah, well, in thinking about writing lesson plans about other artists and kind of their background and how they create, I think some of that comes into my process as well. Okay,
thanks, Sheryl. Sarah, we actually have a specific question for you too, if I could just sneak that one in. How has the transition from your former landscape affected your interaction and working relationship with your current landscape environment? So I guess we should tell people you're new to Texas, right? So what is it like to work in landscape and then find yourself living and working in a very new vista?
Yeah, I think I've taught art full time for the last 8 years, mostly high school. And I began in Utah, and then I moved to Arizona. to be nearer to family. And then I got married and moved to Virginia. And then
Very different landscapes at each stop.
Yeah. So I've drawn from, not always, but in recent years, I've tended to draw images from local landscape where I was situated when I was making work and teaching. And I think that's definitely changing, especially here, because there are not a lot of vistas in Texas. And so
you must have to travel out to the west then.
yeah. But as there's not as many peaks, I think my work transitioned a little bit from thinking about spaces in canyons or outlooks, or thinking about the land in a different way, to these dense spaces. I've been trying to pull my images that I'm working with now all exclusively from the Texas landscape.
Right. And that was something that stood out to me about your monoprints. And they're sort of somewhat sort of ghostly and quiet, but that they're visually really, really noisy. And it kind of made me think about kind of Texas sprawl and suburbia, that it looks kind of quiet, but there's a lot going on there. So that work kind of acts as a metaphor in a way for Texas. So, okay, well, it's going to be interesting to see the longer you're in Texas, how that influences your landscape work. I have one more quick question for Ben. I'm really fascinated in photography anyway. Anybody that knows me will tell you that. And I'm particularly interested in the relationship between photography and sculpture. So I was, curious to see how you're working with photography, but then also those new little noses that you're making. And I wonder if that's going to be kind of a strong element that develops in your work, something that you're looking at, that relationship between sculpture and photography and going back and forth. I wonder if you just talk for a moment or two about that.
Yeah. So by layering photography and layering drawings on top, I'm trying to create a dimensionality with the layering effect of it, as well as the draping of them. So with the large scale photos that I have, that I showed in the video, the layering of them and how they kind of overlap and how they drape down become sculptural because of the way that they drape and the way that they lift up. And so I'm trying to relate that back to my sculptures with the noses, which are figurative, clearly, and the icon of the nose, which is like important to my work specifically. And so, yeah, so I think just discovering the body and discovering how that relates to me and my work.
Right, kind of the forensic nature of photography in terms of identity and how that
absolutely
transforms.
And the breaking
in
down
sculpture.
of photography as well.
Yeah, I enjoy that about seeing your Polaroids, certainly doing that. We are close to moving on to our second segment, but before we do, I have one question that came through in the chat. It's kind of a general one. Do you choose, this is to all of you, do you choose specific mood or inspirational music when you're working? And is it a strategic choice to help with the execution of what you're doing?
I think it depends on what type of work I'm making. I tend to listen to like hip hop or rap, or actually K-pop lately. So.
Oh, nice, right? Anyone else?
I was gonna say I don't always listen to music. I listen to a lot of audiobooks.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes if there's more noise, like more talking in the background, I can zone out and work better on the pieces, unless I need to get stuff done. And then it's got to be faster music, as Ben talked about, like if you're at a deadline, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
You crank up the EDM or something like that. Sheryl?
I listen to a lot of food podcasts.
Ooh.
When I work. So yeah, or other podcasts in general, but lately food.
And is that the like a foodie review type thing, or is it like recipes, like learning about how things are made? Is it the process?
It's a little bit about process, and it's about, different foods and cultural history and backgrounds. about them. They interview a lot of chefs and food writers.
And we should say that for students, food is a really important part of your studio practice. We noticed Ben had some snacks at the ready, but usually at an in-person studio, open studio, you'd have some snacks and some hospitality for our visitors. So we're sorry we're missing out on snacks right now. Madi, did you, as a last comment, want to talk about the music that you listen to?
I'm weird. I like silence.
Oh, okay. That's not weird.
No, I just like work in silence.
Okay, I guess you can probably hear Ben's or everybody else's going on around you, maybe. So
Yeah.
some kind of music in the background. Well, thank you all. I know we're just about out of time for your segment, but we're going to come back, as I say, at the end of the session, and we'll have a chance to ask you questions, or you guys will have a chance to ask the other students some questions too. So thank you. Thank you all for your video work, and thank you for your participation and responding to questions and observations here right now. Thanks. And we're going to move on to our second years. And I'm really happy to introduce our second years, Fernando Alvarez, Doug Land, Adrianna Touch, and Corrie Thompson. And I've had the pleasure of working with them in the gallery. And we're lining up their videos so you can watch their segment, and then we'll come back and you'll have a chance to ask some questions. So again, please post your comments and questions in the chats, and we'll be back after this video. Thank you.
Hey everyone, welcome to my studio. My name is Fernando Alvarez. I'm a second year MFA candidate here at TCU, and I will be sharing most of what I've been up to this semester. All of us second years go through a candidacy review, so all the work on the walls has been made with the intention of possibly being featured in that exhibition we all participate in. A little bit about myself. I'm originally from Tegucigalpa, Honduras, hence this giant flag on my wall. All my work addresses displacement from my home country along with residual behavior that comes from being away from home. I am traditionally a text-based painter, but this semester I have made the effort to expand my use of text by playing with the format. Instead of traditionally painting on canvas, I am now introducing assisted ready-mades, like for example this t-shirt I made that I've paired with this wrap suit case. This is a piece I hope to feature in the candidacy exhibition. Another piece I've been working on. This is a draft of the piece. Essentially, it's a series of placards showing fish you would find off the coast of my home country. I'm using this as a stand-in for the idiom fish out of water, which is essentially talking about my being in this country and not feeling at home. This piece is tentatively called Family Portrait. If you look a little closer, I have taken these to the gun range and I have shot the individual placards. This is my junk corner. Essentially, everything I've made here at TCU eventually gets pushed into this corner. This is another draft for a series of works I've been working on this semester, which is essentially referencing these mid-century phonetic cards people would use to teach kids how to speak English. I am doing a piece for every letter in the alphabet and treating them as exercises for micro-alliterative poems or statements about displacement. This one being the A1 in the alphabet, and the statement reads, Abrupt American Alien. This is another piece I made for candidacy. It is a series of printed greeting cards I made of my hometown in a very American aesthetic. I will be in this country for the same time I will have been in Honduras, which is 16 years, and that marker is coming up pretty quickly. So I decided to present the same greeting cards 16 times and progressively sand them down until all the visual imagery is no longer visible. My latest piece is this guy on the floor. Again playing with the idiom fish out of water, but also playing with the idiom sleeping with the fishes. I'm pairing it with a boombox that I found on eBay that will be playing the song Every Breath You Take by the Police. Essentially, this is a reference to the paranoia I carry with me every day, which is informed by being displaced from a dangerous environment. that's all I got for you. Thanks for joining.
This is my studio. 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 Roly polies.
Oh, hi. I'm Adrianna Touch, and I'm a MFA second year sculpture candidate, and I'm just over here playing with some sand, but I guess you all been waiting for me to get into the studio, so let me change out of my sweater and then we'll get started. So before we get into my studio, I would like to show y'all some things that can't fit in my studio that I have to work out here. So this is kind of an oversized laundry basket made out of clay. And this piece, in a sense, is me in remembrance of my grandmother. So I have outdoor shelving, which I have some pieces that I'm also working for candidacy. I'm making a series of heads that will kind of lay on a traditional mat that we call kate in Khmer. And these are just some cups I've made because I'm also a teaching assistant. So these are just some of the other clay objects I've been working on. I'm more comfortable. So let's walk in. This is my studio. Oh my god. Over here is my work desk. And I'm working on a ceramic chair that is in reference to a memory I have of the funny occurrence of plastic chairs in my life. Some more clay figures. And then these are some ceramic wands I've been working on in another abstracted form. So I'm not necessarily married to the material of clay, but I do find comfort in working in that material as it, you know, it's easy for my hand to be shown through that material. And here I'm just showing a quick shot of my shelf of small clay figures, but also some found objects that I like to have around me. And so, yeah, that's my studio tour. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope we can have some interesting questions about my work. So, thanks again.
Hi, I'm Corrie Thompson, and I mostly draw and make artist books. Right now, I'm making a body of work for my MFA candidacy show at TCU. In these pieces, I'm using night imagery as a metaphor for complicated experiences. I'm thinking of opposing feelings like peace and vigilance, and especially the coexistence of wonder and fear. Most of my work starts with a source photo that I take myself, often on the way home from my studio at night. Then when I start drawing, I plan the composition so that the image is at odds with the paper in some way. I try to use source photos that show moments when I felt particularly exposed to the world. So I'm trying to build tension with the composition, but also with the really dark values of the graphite that I'm using. These pieces have taught me a lot about drawing itself, and I've found that I work really well with the limitation of just using graphite. It actually gives me a lot of space for creative problem solving. My pieces usually take about a week or two, and I make most of them right here at this desk. I keep a lot of notes on this wall, and also my collection of tiny things that I like to look at. I work on titles on this wall as well. I write down words that I'm thinking about and lines from books that I'm reading. And then I turn this language around in my head for a long time, like months or years. And eventually it ends up in my work.
Well, thank you. Thanks for those great videos. And it's going to take me like till next Christmas to read all the questions that are in the chat for you. So get ready. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, first question. This is for Doug. I have a ton of questions too. I'll get to those after these. Question for Doug. Doug, your work this semester seems like a noticeable departure from last semester with regards to your aesthetic. And the person would like to know if you could talk a little bit about this change and whether it's deliberate or not, and kind of what comes first, the concept or the object. Actually, that's the second question, I guess. But can you talk about the change that's going on with your work right now, Doug?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I can hear the echo in the other room. You know, I think this has kind of like been a state of mourning of basically everything in my studio has been set on fire, like some sort of purging act of mourning. And so I think coming from the studio practice last year, which was much more open, to this one where we're much more restrictive and kind of dancing on this precipice of an unknown point, I think it's coming through my work as a point of kind of like walking through the forest after it's been set on fire. And so it's watching things and watching what comes after that situation. And sometimes that's hard to watch when sort of actively around us, it still feels like there's fires popping up.
It's not a controlled fire then? It's not one that you set yourself?
It is something I set myself, but I think that's the same with sort of how I feel around me. Like there's stuff going on that I have no control over, but I have a control over my direct actions. And so I think that's where the work is kind of taking the fire and guiding it and trying to see how that destructive act can be turned into a creative act.
Mm-hmm. And just to further to that, just from your video piece, your studio, it's many different locations. Could you talk for just a moment about how you would characterize those different spaces? Are they places that you work on your own, or you're working in collaboration with people? Could you just characterize those different studio spaces?
Yeah, so, you know, I have the studio that we have on campus, but it's small and it's hard to pull all my tools in there. So I have a studio that I work on at home to actually assembly everything, and then I bring them to school to kind of stage them. So that's one studio. Then I also do a really active amount of gardening on my own and in the community and on private residences. Because I'm trying to understand these spaces that are sometimes neglected, that they always seem like an afterthought. So like, you know, the campus is a perfect example where we have a lot of growth and it's very controlled and it's very pristine. But I personally question whether or not, is that the best approach? Do things live in there? Is it an ecosystem or is it sterile? Is it alive? Is it dead? Because some things that look alive are actually quite dead. And so,
and vice versa.
Right, exactly. And so, you know, a rotten log in the middle of the woods or in the middle of the field may seem dead, but, you know, pour some water on it and see what crawls out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm using these spaces that I sort of work in to see how the role of an artist shifts based on the location. Almost like another animal in the landscape. You know, what tools do I have that I possess that I can use to influence the space, and how am I influenced by that space?
And a different set of questions in each of those spaces by the sounds of it. Yeah. Thank you, Doug. It's wonderful to see we have a question for the artist tonight from Scotland. It's the middle of the night there. This is from Robin Woolston, who sends her greetings to everybody. And she has a question for all of you with the progression of your work. She wants to know how if you feel like you're beginning to develop a visual language that you can rely on and return to. And this is a British artist that you had studio visits with a year or so ago, a little bit less than that. So she's sort of curious about the progress that you feel like you're making and how you're sort of challenging that framing of your own visual language. So that's to anyone who wants to pick that up and answer that. Thank you, Robin.
I guess I'll go.
You're the language guy, so
yeah,
you should.
I'm not saying visual language is language itself. But also, yeah, this semester, like, I went in knowing exactly what I wanted to say with my work. So it was a lot easier to build a code for it. And through that, I've developed this like falling back to idioms in American language as this way to talk about displacement and being someone that's no longer in my, I guess, my natural place. So yeah, as far as building a visual language, that's completely informed by that way of thinking of like gravitating towards American language as a way to get to my points. And I guess a good example for this year's body of work is I have 3 different pieces I'm planning on that are fish centric. So there's 2 sculptures that involve fish molds, and then these placards that I showed in the video you showed that are essentially all the fish that you would find in my home country. So I'm getting to these ideas through not only an American language, but through signs and icons and I guess iconography is the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I was just going to say that my visual language has developed by just paying really close attention to the things that I already like looking at. So, for example, with the body of work that I'm doing right now, that comes out of years of taking pictures of clouds and like just giving myself permission to pay attention and to appreciate those things. And then when I do that and I look closely, I can find the themes that are there, and then I can pay closer attention to those themes, and it just kind of feeds into itself.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Corrie. Adrianna.
For me, since I guess the work I'm reflecting on for candidacy has been more kind of a reaction of the events that happened to me at home. I was staying at home for most of my quarantine. So I feel like I was working on a big scope of like, because a lot of my work is about my cultural identity of being Cambodian American and trying to like recollect the parts that I felt I was missing. But it felt so big and there's so much to talk about. And of course, it's going to be a years long work, but I think honing it down to specific things, like, I guess for me, it means family. It means like incomplete inheritance. Those, just honing it down into a like one subject of that's part of that branch of the culture and also my own identity, that helps me with the visual language. And plus also in some ways not totally married to clay, but like just using one material also helps with that. Just like, I guess, the honing in part.
Yeah, the language of the laundry basket where you're gathering things in a sense. Those displaced objects are ending up in the laundry basket, but also the chairs, like that seats the body, that carries the body in a very particular way. So yeah, I can see that. Thank you. I'm going to go to a couple of specific questions in the chat. Corrie, couple for you. Could you talk about the empty spaces around the imagery in your works and how you see that space interacting with the negative space of the paper? If you could just talk about those empty spaces for a moment.
Yeah, I've been using these negative spaces in my drawings, like you can kind of see over here, to, I guess, drive the amount of tension that's in the image. So not just placing it where you would expect it to be, right in the center of the page, but allowing there to be some friction between the placement of the image and the page that it's sitting on, so that sometimes it might feel like the drawing has kind of overcome the whole page, and in other instances, the drawing is maybe getting pushed off of it. That's kind of the reasoning behind it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That tension. Doug, and I should say, so the four of you are getting ready for your candidacy show, and in fact, next month, you're gonna kind of start your installation and get ready for that and have your committee meetings. We'll open your show officially in spring. And so with that in mind, Doug, this question's for you. What is your plan, or your sort of like, what's your final result that you kind of have in mind when you're in the process of your works? Or is the process and the experimentation what drives what the final thing is? Like, which way are you working, or is it different with each project you take on?
So each installation, I think I take on a different version of myself. This semester, I've been really curious about the notions of rebirth and sort of like life coming through. And so each of these works, I've really tried to focus on the materials and whether or not those materials can compost. So this, like, it almost feels more like a sand painting, where at any moment I could take any of my works of art, push it into a compost pile and let the earth eat it, and it would result back into nothing that I could then use to regrow everything back over again. And so I think that element of the forces that cause that, I think that's what I've been really interested in for this show coming up. So as the curator, I'm going to warn you, there might be some moving parts in there that are a little bit more alive than you would like.
Hey, I've dealt with taxidermied live animals and grass before, so living things in the gallery we can handle, no problem. Let's see, we have just a couple of minutes before we're getting ready for our view with the third years. I have one question for Adrianna. Can you talk about those ceramic wands? Are they does that come from a specific sort of theme, or is that linked to a specific memory? And I have to say, I was really intrigued by those too. Do they really hold magical power?
I like to think they do. They come from, I grew up watching a lot of anime, and I still watch a lot of anime. And there's a specific genre called magical girl that I really am captivated by. It's kind of like a subtle, like, it was like one of the only representational forms of like women superheroes that I liked growing up. And then I'm kind of linking them to the Apsara figure, which is basically in Khmer culture, there are female dancers, or in some myths and other mythologies, they can be known as nymphs and fairies. So I'm kind of trying to link those things together. I don't know how it'll fit into my candidacy show, but I am still making scepters or wands.
Maybe you're gonna hatch some hocus pocus on the whole show, right, to give it some good vibes.
Yeah.
Just a final question. Thank you, Adrianna. A final question for Fernando. I would just like to know, in terms of the ready-made objects that you're now working with, what's your process of selection for those objects?
Really, it's been accidental, to be honest. I'm someone that sketches pieces way in advance. So I went into the semester, since we had this extended summer with COVID, just knowing exactly what I wanted to make. And for example, one of the pieces I made was 2 books, which you'll see in a video shortly after this. And I got those books for research, and then in a week of frustration, I put them both in bags, and they ended up being my favorite thing I've made in a bit. So yeah, really, it's something that's super new to me. I had been doing a lot of text on canvas last year, and this semester I went in with a deliberate plan to work specifically with assisted ready-mades and stuff that wasn't on canvas. So I think
so different kind of challenge for yourself.
Yeah, opening myself up to that, I think, is really the only process, really. I just kind of let them come to me. The books and the suitcase really were accidental, just mixing these materials with other materials that I've leaned on before.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, second years. We've got to give up a little time for our third years. But thank you so much, each of you, for participating and telling us a little bit more about your practice and answering the questions. We'll see you in the final segment before we finish up. But thank you. And I would like to introduce our next segment, which is video pieces by our third years. You're going to find out about the work of Clint Bargers, Ashley Stecenko, Chris Wicker, and Zeke Williams. And then we'll be back for a quick Q&A with them after that. So please enjoy their videos and keep putting your comments and questions in the chat. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to my studio. My name is Clint Bargers. I am a third-year sculpture graduate student here at TCU. I received my undergraduate degree in visual and critical studies and sculpture from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in 2008. I was born in 1984 in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and grew up mostly along Colorado's Front Range. Line. Reboot. As if props for a comedically nightmarish movie, my sculptures use practical special effects materials, subcultural ephemera, and analog technology to reference horror fiction, countercultural expression, and hysteria. They are bloodied altars to the customized, the defined, the esoteric, and the irreverent. I think of them as tombstones for those whose only sin was that they wanted so desperately to belong. They are disembodiments of a bygone era, objects of the personal and the social, overheated and exhausted. Haunted and sarcastic, my sculptures are ridiculous testaments to the fact that, yes, I am in fact the monster you think I am.
Hey, I'm Ashley. I'm a third-year grad student, and this is a tour of my studio. So, this is my studio. It's kind of a mess, but that's just the way I roll. Recently, I've been doing a lot of solvent-based transfer drawing and sewing onto translucent fabric, which I'll then stretch. I've also been playing around with some shapes, but about a year ago, I really fell in love with photo transferring as a way to paint and to draw and to collage. And that's why my floor is riddled with just paper that I can use. The themes in my work address my experience with family and displacement, and even more recently, thinking about reclaiming personal space as it relates to home. So photography has been a way for me, I guess, to use it as a tool to document my surroundings. And then transferring has been a way to reimagine that space. But in this newer work, I've been kind of constructing a space through drawing, and by overlapping drawings and allowing these drawings to bleed into each other, I'm kind of constructing a new space. These drawings are very playful, but still emotionally charged. They're sourced from memories and dreams and I guess personal, physical spaces of my home and all the homes I've ever lived in. But I usually work on the floor, and so this is what I like to call my little nest. And so, like I said, my process involves working on unstretched fabric, and I will use acetone and my little paintbrush, and usually a pencil, to transfer draw. And then I'll flip this around a bunch of times and work on the back until I feel like I have a composition that I enjoy. And then I'll either sew into this and then stretch it, or I will stretch it and then sew into it. But that's what I've been doing right now. Really just been kind of focusing on prepping for thesis in the spring. So that is my studio. Thank you so much for checking it out, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Hi everyone, my name is Chris Wicker, and I am a third-year MFA here at TCU, and this is my studio. So, about a year and a half ago, I started work with found footage and appropriated media, specifically with professional wrestling. Being a fan of the sports entertainment medium, I was able to pull from my knowledge and couple it with how I edit video formally to create works like this. Since then, I've broadened my scope a little bit, and I have started to look at media from around 2000 to 2006.
By media from around 2000 to 2006, I'm referring to commercials, television shows, movies, and any other additional pieces associated with these categories. This specific time period was a time in my life where I was constantly watching television. What you're seeing now is some of my new work that has stemmed from the way I handled the appropriated media in the work involving professional wrestling and how that's translated into this bigger scope that I mentioned earlier.
You can order now and receive a free bonus CD.
You call, ask about our ShamWow shopping.
Order now, get a free bonus CD of
For $29.94.
370-4433. Order 854-47.
Once again, taking a more formal approach to this media and how I handle it, but still being aware that I'm using video from a certain time period to convey this approach. Here is a small tour of my studio to show you what the space I'm working with is like. A small couch there, some chairs in the corner if anyone wants to sit down or throw down. We have some monitors here that I will use for future projects. Ric Flair's mouth here in the corner. And then I have my desk that I do most, if not all, of my editing on. I try to have at least 2 of these monitors going in the background at all times with a tape or a DVD that I'm interested in at the moment. Right now, it is the Cinematic Classic Batmonk. And then here is a shelf for books and any other bits and bobs that I have lying around the studio. Tapes, stereos, mannequin heads. But I think that's it for me, so thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon.
Hi, I'm Zeke Williams. I'm a 3rd year. My major is technically printmaking, but I make these painting type things. They're carved wood with a CNC machine and then painted using brayers that you would use for printmaking. Sometimes I actually make prints of them. The images right now are mostly sourced from photographs my grandfather took of national parks. Here's a large oval of the Grand Canyon. This is the first big oval I've made. So you can see each piece is jigsaw cut out and then fitted together after they're painted. Then they're framed. Making an oval frame was fun. I had to steam the wood. Caca! Anyway. Oh, here's a bulldog that I made. Similar process, but with a laser cutter. Here's my computer desk, a Eames aluminum group chair, and here's some photocopy works that I was working on, and a pterodactyl, similarly made with a laser cutter. Anyway, follow me at Zeke Williams.
So I know like you're in the throes of things because you're getting ready for your thesis shows, right? So thank you first for taking time out to make those videos for us. I know that cuts into your studio time. And we do have a couple of questions in the chat. Actually, the first one is for Clint. Clint, can you tell us more about how subculture plays a role in your work? I know you talked about the ephemera of subculture. Which subcultures are you investigating and exploring. Could you talk about that a little bit more for us?
Sure. Yeah, I typically use subcultures that I have some kind of personal relationship with. So something that I grew up with, such as heavy metal or motorcycle culture, skateboarding, these sorts of things. And I see subculture as these places where we go to express ourselves because popular culture isn't really satisfying those expressions for us. And I think that those that are attracted to those subcultures are typically people who aren't necessarily trying to define themselves as an individual, but searching for a group to belong. So I think really the core of the work is about trying to find belonging.
And in that respect, then your work has a little bit of overlap perhaps with what Chris is doing too, in terms of subculture of wrestling, but also in terms of video advertising. Would you say, Chris, is that a fair connection?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, we shared a studio our first year at TCU, so you can definitely see that overlap. But you know, especially with the wrestling work that I'm not currently doing right now, but not totally stepping away from, there's definitely that kind of subculture aspect of it where it's a group of people who subscribe to this kind of theater. And they are okay with it and they know the ins and outs of it. But it's still like a place of belonging, or, you know, a place to be a part of something larger that isn't in the pop culture eye.
Right, a belonging, but still a kind of underground belonging.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wrestling is a little bit bigger now. But, yeah.
But when you were watching it in the time period that you're talking about, maybe that's when it's sort of coming of age, becoming popular, would you say? Or is it just right before?
There's a lot of golden ages, or depending on who you talk to, like some people might say the 80s with Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage was like the time period to watch. Others say the 90s with the Attitude Era, like Stone Cold and The Rock. And then for me, you know, it's more of like the 2000s, early 2000s kind of stuff with Triple H, Randy Orton. So it's really just depends on who you talk to. But I would say the more people agree that the older stuff, the 90s or the 80s, is kind of where people lie as far as like, this is the best wrestling
ever.
Yeah, ever.
Right. And has anybody in the studios taken you on with your chairs? I wondered if you've actually thrown down with anyone up there.
I've hit Zeke a couple times.
Okay.
But other than that, no one's challenged me. We need a title belt to challenge for.
Well, I can see this as part of your thesis show, so maybe.
Fair enough.
You third years are going to round it off. Zeke, we have a question for you. Could you talk more about your transition to using cutouts to making these with the CNC router compared to the work that you were making maybe in your first year when you got here? Maybe you could explain that to people, the shift in your making.
So the first year I was here, I was making mainly digitally printed works that would sometimes have paint on top of them, but mostly were just paintings I would design in Adobe Illustrator and then print out and stretch. And sometimes there'd be different. Sometimes there'd be like two different paintings that were like jammed together as part of this process. During that, I did a demo for the first year printmakers on laser etched wood blocks. And I designed this little Mandarin duck print for it and laser cut out all the pieces for it. And it just came out really great. And I'd always wanted to learn to use the CNC machine, so I guess last year sometime decided to try and use that to make one of these images. And at the same time, my grandfather had just died, and I'd been left this large trove of photographs he'd taken of national parks and like family trips, and so I started using those for inspiration for the imagery, and it's all kind of been taken off since then. I've done a lot of them, and I plan to do a lot more. So.
And for your candidacy show, you had a very large piece last year. So.
Yeah, we had a 12-footer.
So
I don't recommend making 12-foot things that don't come apart. That's not a good plan.
That's a good piece of advice, kids. Thanks, Zeke. Ashley, thank you so much for the just really sort of close-up sort of vision of how you're making things. And I should say that, you know, one of the privileges of working as staff in an art school is getting to see students come in and over the period of years, like really change what and how they're making. And certainly that's what I've seen with your work. And it's been really fun. And like I say, a privilege to kind of watch that and see what you're doing. And you're having a lot of fun now with Yupo paper and kind of playing around with the photo transfers and also now sewing onto fabric. Is there something ahead that you're looking at? Not necessarily thinking for your thesis show, but have you learned some things along the way that you're thinking, oh, when I have time and space or a budget, I'm going to try X or something, what materials or ideas? Is there anything you're dreaming about?
I mean, I love Yupo paper and especially the translucent quality of Yupo paper. And I'm still bummed out that like I can't get Yupo paper any larger than like, the size like 48 by 30 or something. So the fabric became like a way for me to like still work translucent and like go larger. But in terms of like working, I don't know, like the fabric is such a new material that I think I have I have a lot of time to continue to explore that alone.
Right. Okay.
I haven't even thought about anything else.
Okay. And I just want to flag up and let people know that Ashley's work is actually installed in an exhibition over at the Moncrief Cancer Institute here in Fort Worth at the moment as part of a partnership program that the galleries and the school has with the Institute, and our students curate and show works over there. So I know there's a selection of quite new work that you have over there right now, Ashley, that people will be able to get to see online, even though they can't visit, but thank you for that. Guys, I just have some like a kind of like a generational question for you as third years, because you're sage and can invoke your wisdom now after 3 years in the program. What would be your one piece of advice for the first years at the end of their first semester? What's your one piece of advice to them? What do you wish someone had told you at the end of your first semester?
I've got one. I would say like, take everyone's opinions with a grain of salt and just know that like, I think sometimes, what your inner head is saying, what your inner monologue is saying is sometimes right. So
learn how to kind of weed things out of the way, right? Don't be derailed.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a certain amount of this is definitely about like strengthening your personal resolve, like being bombarded a little bit. I mean, TC is not particularly hardcore, but it's still part of the process. Yeah, I mean, this is all about just like getting bombarded constantly, because when you get out, no one ever asks you anything,
Right. So it's the rigor of critique. It's the rigor of those papers you have to write for your art history classes. There is an energy and a depth involved in your research outside of the studio too, and having to kind of be able to speak up and have formed opinions about other things, not just your work, right? Chris, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say, if you're scared or unsure or feel like you're floundering, then you're in the right place. Like at the end of my first semester, I was definitely feeling that kind of way of not knowing what direction I was going or how everything was going to work out. But that's what this first year is for that kind of experimentation or that play. So it's, it sucks to say, but it's like, if you're scared or unsure, then you're in the right spot in the program.
And how important has it been to you guys to have the studio space and facilities that you've had in your almost 3 years at TCU? Are we going to get a sense of that when we see your solo thesis show in the spring?
I think.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think so. I didn't have a studio for like 10 years. I took a long time off between undergrad, so it's like an invaluable resource to be able to be here. But I think a true artist, like, you'll be able to adapt and work anywhere. But the studio has provided me opportunity to make things that I normally would never have been able to.
Thanks, Clint. Zeke, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, just echoing the same stuff, if this is your deal, you're going to find a way, but it's much easier when everything is here. All the tools are plugged in and ready to go. And it's just a question of doing it. When you have to go to your rented studio space and get everything running and do cleanup afterward. I mean, you have to do that here too, but like, it's very easy to use a new technology here because the technology is here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I have to spend 10 grand on a CNC machine, it's a lot harder to get started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's much harder.
Yeah. Now that I'm started, I can contemplate spending 10 grand on a CNC machine, but
That you can do that.
but I would never have thought about that before.
Well, we're coming to the end of our little segment with you. And I just had one last question that had come through on the chat a little bit earlier. And this seems like a kind of an interesting question. We can open that up to the other students in just a moment. But somebody was asking, is there a specific time, event, or occasion that resulted in each of you thinking of yourself as an artist rather than just someone who liked art?
I was 13, 14 years old. I was at the Fort Worth Modern. I saw these 3 Ellsworth Kelly paintings. I might have been 12. I don't know. I saw them, and you know how some people say I could do that? I was like, I'm going to do that.
So that's a very particular memory for Zeke. Anybody else?
I think for me, it was getting out of undergrad and doing, or exiting undergrad, doing my BFA show, and then realizing like everything that goes into that, and knowing that I was applying to grad school and potentially getting in, and what that meant. So not definitely a specific event, but yeah, that's for me.
I would just bounce off of what Chris was saying, that, well, and I wouldn't say like it wasn't like a very specific time like Zeke was, but just like I think exiting undergrad and like knowing I wanted to go to grad school felt like a, you know, like making that decision just solidified that like I want to be an artist and I want to take
that threshold.
And,
yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it wasn't even that long ago, but yeah.
Thanks, Ashley. Clint?
I don't think I liked art till I saw Bruce Nauman. And I saw it when I was a little too young. I was like probably 16 or 17, and I didn't understand what I was looking at. But I just knew it was really cool, and I had to do it. So there was never any like, I like art, and now I'm an artist. It was just, oh, I relate to that. That resonates. I'm doing that. It's kind of like Zeke. It was just instantaneous.
That was it. This is what I'm going to do. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, third years, and stick around. I'm going to ask our other MFA students to come back and join us for a quick little group discussion and to answer any sort of final philosophical questions before we look at a video of your collective exhibition. So those students that are coming back, hello, here we go. Yay. And we can see some of you down in the sculpture area. That's great. Do you have questions for each other? Like going through this process and being reflective, do you have questions for each other?
For us in the room or us overall?
Say again, Zeke.
Pretty sure that was Doug.
Oh, sorry. I'm not here. Doug. Okay, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, right here, yellow mask.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I've been really fascinated by the sense of community. So since I came here, we have felt like a whole bunch of cousins that have moved into the same house. And I don't know if, like Sara-Jayne, when you were at school, if that's a normal situation. Does anyone else feel that too?
I think in the best of situations, yes. I mean, certainly people I went to graduate school with that I'm still in touch with and, you know, value their opinion and perspective that I stay in touch with. So yeah, I mean, you've become your own little community, your own family in a way. So my experience was that way. I know that's not the same for everybody, but yeah, you do seem like a very particular group. Okay, well, I'll ask another generic, we're on TV question. What's the hardest thing about grad school that nobody ever told you?
I'd say making time for the stuff outside of school. I know that sounds really obvious, but I went in thinking that it was going to be really easy to balance time with friends, family, my spouse, and time at school. But to thrive in this environment, you really have to be here for a really long time, and you really have to think things through, and really you really have to spend a lot of studio time, I guess is what I'm saying.
I mean, I've always been very critical of I don't ever see any of these grad students out at art openings or whatever, and doing it, it's like, oh yeah, it's hard. You're busy, and then
You're in your studio.
You're in your studio, and then like on the weekends, your family might want to see you, and maybe you don't want to go to art openings. I mean, I still do it because I'm a psychopath, but like, not everyone does, and that's okay, the time requirements are for real. Like, it's a full-time job, no questions asked.
And for some of you, I guess we should say too, as you progress through the 3-year program, you have different opportunities for teaching as a teaching assistant and then a teacher of record. So some of you are teaching for the first time this semester. Would you talk about those experiences and how that's influencing your practice, making you think about the future, whether you're, going to become a teacher or, really what you think you'll do with that experience and that knowledge?
For me, a big takeaway that I'm getting is during the critiques that I have with my students, just based on the projects that we've done and what they're seeing in each other's work, what I'm seeing in their work, and how that conversation happens or develops, has even helped me, kind of look at my own work and see what other people might think, or how I'm approaching the situation as opposed to who else is approaching the situation. So it's definitely helped gain some other perspectives. Of course, we have faculty and our peers to also give those extra outside perspectives, but more is definitely better in this case, I'd say.
And you learn a lot from your students.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Right.
Anybody else?
I'll just say that I think I knew this, but you can never be fully prepared for like teaching for your first time until you just do it. Like there's just things that you're going to learn along the way, and you're going to get better as you do it more, like as you teach more, I guess. And that was something that like I think I just like really like hit home like the first couple of weeks I started teaching. But I also like, I always thought that I would want to teach, but never felt like I could really say, yeah, I want to teach, because I've never done it. But now after doing it, like I really do enjoy like just having that kind of dialogue with other people. And it feels like really strange, people like looking up to me and being like, hey, how do you do this? And it's like, whoa.
I can actually show you.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Anybody else?
Yeah, I never considered myself to be a person who wanted to be a teacher, and now that I'm doing it, I'm enjoying it, and it's really it's pretty rewarding, even though we're doing it over Zoom. At least my class is.
Right.
And it's probably something I'm going to be doing a lot in the future, and because that's what artists do who have MFAs to some extent, and so I'm enjoying it. Again, it's never been my desire to be a teacher. That's not why I went to grad school, so that I could teach, and but it turns out, it's pretty good, and I think I've got something to share. So
Good.
Yeah.
Well, I've got one eye on the clock, and before we get booted off air, I just wanted to ask the group one more question before we watch our final short video of the evening, and that is your group exhibition, Cancel the Chicken. You guys are a humorous bunch, I know that. Okay, so Cancel the Chicken, is that like, tell me what's going on there, really? Or shouldn't I ask?
Wait, should I tell them?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
You came up with it.
Was it Adrianna? Oh gosh.
So one day we were trying to get food, and Fernando suggested we should get pupusas, and we have a group chat, and we wanted to see who else wanted to join. And Madi was picking up materials for sculpture and ceramics departments, and she was getting some food, which was canes. And she was like, we were sending the message, and then she said, "Oh shoot, I got canes." And I'm like, and then I said on the chat, "Cancel Code Red, cancel the chicken." And somehow it stuck. And we were when we had a meeting to like discuss this whole happening, we really fought for that. So,
well, I think it's you know, of the mode in which we are communicating across Zoom and other digital platforms, that was the collective moment by the sounds of it. So, okay, I did wonder, and I was pretty sure actual food was involved. So thanks for clearing up that mystery. Knowing you lot, it was bound to be food. So we're gonna wrap things up for now. And I should just say to our listeners, to our viewers, if you're interested in learning more about the MFA program that our wonderful graduates here are participating in, if you want to find out more, please contact the galleries for more information. We can put you in touch with faculty and people in the School of Art who can tell you all about our programs and answer any questions that you have. That goes for graduate and undergraduate. So please be in touch, and you can follow the galleries on social media. We're going to be posting updates about the 12 artists that you've met here today. We'll be posting updates about the grad students in the spring for their candidacy show and their solo thesis exhibitions. And I should also add to that, and not to be forgotten, we'll be posting information about the activities of our master's students who are studying art history, who are hard at work organizing an exhibition that'll open in spring that features the work of our faculty. So do stay tuned. You'll find out more about our graduate programs here. I would like to say a big round of applause to our graduates here this evening. Thank you so much for your efforts. Great videos. I've enjoyed our conversations. I feel like we've started a new TCU tradition of virtual studio night. I feel very privileged to spend time with you, and those that I've spent time with you over 3 years. Thank you so much, and especially those working in the galleries with us as technicians, but also helping on exhibitions. Thank you so much. It's one of the best parts of my job, getting to know you, getting to know your work, and then seeing you leave the nest and go out into the world and be artists. It's wonderful. Anybody watching, if you want to learn about these artists, they all have websites. They're all on social media. You can go find them, not a problem. Reach out to them if you have questions that we did not ask tonight, that you have a burning desire to know. They will answer those questions for you. And before we cancel the chicken, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Chris Wicker. Thank you so much for working on the videos and prepping those and getting ready for those for us this evening. And our biggest thanks of the evening, my gratitude to my partner in crime, our gallery manager, Lynné Cravens, yay, for marshaling all of our technical aspects this evening. She's behind the scenes keeping us on track. Thank you so much, Lynné. This has been a really wonderful team effort, and I think that says a lot about our program here at TCU. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to sign out, and we can all do a little wave out, and I'll say until next time, enjoy Cancel the Chicken, which is coming up next. Please take care, wear a mask, keep washing your hands and social distancing, keep making art. Art keeps going. And more than anything, please vote. It's coming up soon. All right, thank you so much, everybody. Cancel the Chicken is up next. Good night.